Hi, it's Greg Kesich. I'm the editorial page editor at the Portland Press Herald, and I am here with part of the Sunday crew with Bill Nemitz and Cynthia Dill. And Alan Karen can't be with us today, so we can talk about him.
A heavy load to carry here.
Yeah. It's all on you guys.
Shoes to fill.
You know, if you want to know about Maine's next economy, you're going to have to wait till next week. But hey, we actually have some news on the political front. We have the first prominent Democrat to announce for governor, Adam Cote. He's a lawyer from Sanford, and I should probably say that my daughter is working for him.
Oh.
So I will continue to have opinions about him because my daughter is one of the many people who don't listen to what I say. So I can I don't have to worry about undue influence. But anyway, so what do you think, Cynthia?
Oh, what do I think? I think he's going to be a formidable candidate. I think it's of some interest that he's privately funded, although not that much. I remember him running against Shelley Pingree in 2006, and I mean, I was on the Pingree camp, and we were afraid at the end that he was going to win. He narrowly lost and has had 10 years of really, I think, impressive public service. He's on the school board in Sanford. He's got 5 beautiful kids. I mean, he's got it all. I think it's interesting that he's first out of the gate, and I'm wondering if his attempt is to possibly, the strategy there has to be to start fundraising in earnest, get validators and supporters, maybe block out some other opponents. So I welcome him to the race.
Yeah, I've known Adam for a long time. My trips to Afghanistan and Iraq include 3 embeds that I did with units of which he was a ranking officer. So I've kind of seen him in action, literally, several times over the years, and I agree with Cynthia. I think he's a very formidable candidate. I think he surprised a lot of people back in 2008.
Yep, that's right.
And
6.
When she first
2006,
and he's really. He hasn't missed a beat. And, I think one thing that he has going for, a couple of things he has going for him. One is that, he's coming from the outside, and everybody craves that right now. He is one of those kind of born leader kind of guys, and I can attest to that firsthand, having seen him in some really horrible situations, particularly over in Iraq when the dining hall was bombed. He was actually decorated for his actions on that day, and I saw him that day basically taking a bunch of soldiers some of whom were on the verge of total freakout, and in helping marshal what was an extraordinary response to a massive crisis. And he did it coolly and calmly, and it's kind of burned on my brain that day, but he's a big part of it in terms of how he behaved that day. So I think his war record, and he got the Bronze Star in Afghanistan for his most recent deployment. But beyond that, I think he's got some things going for him that include the fact that he's from Sanford. He's not a quote unquote Portland Democrat. If Sanford is kind of still a somewhat gritty blue-collar town, and coming from a place like that is going to give him more appeal.
I think Trump won Sanford this time.
Yeah.
And he's got very deep roots in that community. He grew up there. His father's a revered basketball coach there. As Cynthia said, he's got a wonderful wife, 5 kids, business background with some entrepreneurial energy business that he did in addition to his law work. So he's really, out of the gate, he has a lot of momentum, and it's going to be interesting to see what kind of campaign he puts together.
In the congressional...
I was just going to say, though, he has a big challenge ahead of him, and that is that the energy around Democratic primaries right now is totally Bernie, and Adam is not the Bernie candidate. So I think it's smart for him to get out early. He needs to now sort of build up his progressive bona fides and meet with this contingent of Democrats who are still riled up about Bernie.
That's what I want to ask you about. So he ran as a moderate when he ran for Congress. And the world has changed quite a bit since 2008. I think it's 2008,
exactly.
Cynthia. I was looking at the Bernie event the other night. I watched it on YouTube, and the crowd is very enthusiastic about Bernie. I'm not sure that they are really that committed to his program.
Well, yeah, that's it.
He keeps saying the same things over and over again. He gets great applause, but I don't see any carryover into the rest of our politics. For instance, I heard LePage speak a couple of nights later, the next night actually, and almost nobody was there. There was no spillover from the Bernie event to the LePage event. People demanding health care for all, or he was protested, but it wasn't about anything that he really had any a record on. So I'm wondering if that Bernie energy is something to be captured, or if it's just something impossible. I mean, will anybody ever be able to grab that?
Yeah, personality-driven thing right now. I think here in Maine, for the next gubernatorial race, what people are really going to be looking for, first and foremost, on the Democratic side and independent side, is a Democrat who can win. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where that might offset some of that, in that there,
you would hope so.
A little realism.
Wasn't that what they were looking for last time?
Yeah, right. Someone who can have some real appeal in southern Maine, to the middle of the political spectrum, independents who are obviously critical to any gubernatorial race.
Yeah.
So I think the Democrats, if they were to nominate a candidate who was, a classic Bernie liberal, I think that it would be disastrous. I just don't think that they would have a chance in November. So you're right. I think if he wins in June of 2018, I think he's going to be a very, very tough candidate to beat in November.
It's going to be interesting to me to see what happens with the clean elections, because, as you probably know, there's a bill at the legislature that would end public financing for gubernatorial candidates. And Terry Hayes, of course, has come out as a candidate, as an independent. And what Democrats fear, of course, going into any election with an independent candidate, is that the vote's going to be split and you're going to end up with somebody like Paul LePage. So even though Democrats typically support the public financing of elections and could prevent its repeal in the House of Representatives, I just wonder if Democrats are going to say, you know what, if we take out clean election financing for the governor's race, that means Terry Hayes is, basically unfinanced. And that might be a way to sort of just keep out some independent candidates that could otherwise throw the race. I don't know.
We have to wait and see what happens with ranked choice voting, too.
That too. I know. There's just so many factors.
Right.
It could make it a non-factor, the third-party candidate, in effect.
It seems like a third-party candidate who used to be a Democrat is always a factor.
Uh-huh.
It just, it is, whether it's actually the ultimate cause of a LePage or not. I just know from campaigning and from strategic-wise, when you have somebody who's sort of a Democrat running against somebody who's sort of a Democrat, it just makes it so much more difficult, because your ideas, for the most part, are the same. You're calling the same donors. It's just...
Well, can Democrats campaign for clean elections for, 20 years, and then suddenly say, we don't want clean elections for governor's candidates?
Well, to Bill's point, I mean, if we want somebody that's going to win, no clean election candidate for governor has ever won. And so I think a Democratic candidate could make the case, just like Barack Obama did. Democrats are generally in favor of clean elections, but if clean election finance campaign can't put you over the finish line, and when you have outside groups spending so much money, I think it's not inconsistent to say, I support clean election campaigns, I support, regulation of, money and finance, but at the same time, I'm going to be a privately funded candidate because I want to run a race that can win.
I disagree. I think it is very inconsistent to pull support for gubernatorial candidates after pushing for it for so long. And you're right. Nobody's ever run and won after Libby Mitchell. People were the analysis was it's a loser. You shouldn't even try.
Enough money.
No governor has ever won with it.
Well, Cote, remember when he ran for Congress in the primary, he raised, I think it was $650,000, which was pretty darn good
money
for your first time out of the gate. And, it's obviously his announcement this week does not mean his fundraising has just begun. This is something that's been clearly going on for some time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And my guess is that part of his announcement, in addition to the strategic considerations that go into announcing early, also reflects some confidence on his and his campaign's part that they've done pretty well, and that this is going to be a viable candidacy and that they can go ahead and proceed and continue to raise money.
Well, if he's already got a couple of excellent employees.
That's right. Well, at least one.
That suggests to me a good beginning.
Yeah. Who else is out there?
Janet Mills, obviously. I think that's going to, if I'm Adam Cote, that's the first name that pops into my head right now because of her obvious name recognition. Talk about family connections,
right,
on both sides of all sides of the political spectrum. I think that she is clearly going to be the person to beat. But then you're also hearing about Adam Lee is serious about this. I don't think Mark Eves has ruled out a run.
Betsy Sweet is going to be announcing her candidacy for governor. She's a Democrat, interesting, competent person. Probably a lot of people don't know her outside of Augusta, but she has been a long time kind of social justice lobbyist, runs her own business, also is a stand-up comedian as well as a healer. So that'll bring an interesting side to our conversation. Well, we just got the wave that we're on to our next subject.
We're on to our next subject. Incredible.
Thank you, Molly.
Cynthia has someplace to be, so we're going to be more expeditious than usual. We hadn't got a chance to talk about this mind-blowing court case that came apart last week, and that was the 25-year-old conviction of a man on a murder charge that was pretty much hinged on the eyewitness testimony of a woman who was blind. A
minor.
A minor.
Under state
and
guardianship.
That was not disclosed to the defense. And Anthony Sanborn of Portland is out on bail, and wow, what do you guys think of that?
I don't think he'll be going back to prison anytime soon. And I wrote a column about this on Sunday, and led with the fact that what you just described sounds like the punchline to a bad joke.
Yeah.
That this could actually have happened, and that critical information about Hope Katie, the witness's eyesight, was not forwarded to the defense during discovery. I got an email from a Portland police officer after the column ran who was quite upset in defense of the two detectives who I mentioned in the column, who have been mentioned in a lot of the news coverage. But as I pointed out to him, the one person whom he didn't name in his email, who I think is really critical to this whole thing, is Pam Ames, who was the assistant AG who prosecuted that case. And now today, so everybody wants her explanation for why this discovery evidence was withheld. And now we hear today that Amy Fairchild, Sanborn's current attorney, is chasing her all over creation because she won't accept service of, they can't seem to serve a subpoena on her. So Pam Ames, it's all going to come down to Pam Ames once they finally get her on the stand and get her to explain just what the heck was going on all those years ago.
Well, the timeline on this is really interesting because the murder happened in '89. He was charged in '90. Mm-hmm. He was 16 at the time of the murder, and
they bound him over.
So there was court proceedings going on. The trial wasn't until 92. And Hope Katie's witness testimony doesn't come around till a few months before the trial. So they had indicted him and were holding him for trial without what turned out to be the key witness.
The star witness.
And so I can just imagine the prosecutor getting a hold of that file and saying to the cops, you got to get me something else. Mm-hmm. This is just not enough, because what did he have? They had a former roommate says he confessed to him.
The guy who's wheeling and dealing with the Florida police.
Yeah.
Where he's telling them he'd never heard a thing, and then he's telling the cops that he heard a confession.
And then they had another guy who says, maybe I saw him that day, and he said he was really mad at her.
Yeah. Right.
There's going to be a movie, I think, made of this. I really do. And what's interesting to me is that this Anthony Sanborn young man, I guess he was part of, according to Amy Fairfield, his attorney, who I spoke with, there was this whole culture of like street kids.
Yeah.
And apparently then Chief Chitwood wrote about it, and Sanborn was part of that. But when he was tried, he wasn't married. He was, like you said, a young, and he ended up getting married while he was in prison.
Right.
And through began with a,
but they're long
almost a
time.
pen pal. Yeah, so they're longtime friends, but they
friends,
reconnected when he was in prison and got married. And I just think that's a really interesting piece of the story. And the other thing that I think is interesting is that apparently when Amy Fairfield met Anthony Sanborn, she was immediately convinced, and she's done quite a lot of criminal defense work, she was immediately convinced of his innocence. And she said like he had this like support group that really carried him through. So, I mean, those circumstances are obviously unique, and it just makes you think like how many other people are rotten in jail who don't have the good luck to hook up with their high school sweetheart and get married and have a support system.
Yeah, I'm not ready to make that jump. I think there are going to be times when we're going to come across a case like this, and through the persistence of a person, in this case, his wife, this stuff is retilled, and lo and behold, the whole case falls apart. I think it's outrageous if all this is true, and if these not just Hope Katie, but if these other witnesses who are now recanting are as shaky as they appear as well. This whole prosecution becomes just a complete fiasco. I think that, again, I think it's a reflection of the prosecutor. And I will say this, if I'm someone who was convicted on a case that she prosecuted, then I think this is going to open up a pretty big can of worms. I
think it's got to be bigger than this case. I think they're going to have to really look at, because the what's alleged here isn't just that they made a mistake or that they were sloppy or that they rushed, but that they put pressure on very vulnerable kids. All, like you said, there was a subculture of kids.
Right.
All of them had some kind of connection with the criminal justice system and had things.
They were all one step away from the slammer.
And they didn't have attorneys. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, when I hear about these things, yes, it was a failure perhaps of the prosecutor. I don't know that for sure, but it was a failure of the system, and the justice system is weak as it is right now, just because there's so many cases and so few lawyers. But when you hear about the case in Massachusetts where, so many cases are being set aside because of the, basic wrongful handling of evidence by the lab assistant. I don't know if you've been following that story in the Globe, and that you have this case. I mean, the injustice is not just to Sanborn, but when you think about the family of the murder victim, they had thought that this matter had been put to rest, that the convicted person was behind bars, and that their daughter's death perhaps was not in vain. Now they have to wonder, well, okay, if he didn't kill her, who did? I mean, that wound is totally ripped open again. It's just, and you just have to wonder, is there going to be any consequences? I don't know.
Well, the whole case takes a much different turn, because this was down at the Maine State Pier where this murder occurred. If I recall, there was a ship full of sailors berthed very close by. And if the story that, it was a street kid killed by another street kid falls apart, then the universe of potential suspects here explodes. Right. And then how do you go about investigating that 26 years after the fact? It's just, I'm not sure it'll ever be solved.
No. And right, they can't go back to a jury with this defendant and what's left of their case. And if they're ever going to be able to investigate it beyond that. One of the things that really jumped out at me from this story was I'd forgotten how many kids there used to be around Portland. And I'm thinking, what happened to all the kids? I mean, there used to be, yes, I used to see them in my neighborhood. I used to see them down at the Old Port.
Did we have, I'm not sure we had the teen shelter, the day program.
No, we did not.
I mean, if you go around the peninsula right now and look, you'll see that Portland has done a pretty good job of creating facilities,
Housing.
shelters, housing, day centers that are pretty successful, number one, in getting these kids off the street, and number two, hopefully, in setting them on a path that's going to be more fruitful for them down the road.
But I think there was also like 300 kids in the youth center, and Charleston had a juvenile program too, and now there's 80, and it's the only one in the state. I mean, it's. I don't know. Maybe it's just our aging population or something, but the character of the city has changed quite a bit during this case.
Right. I mean, you're right. Monument Square around the library, that whole area used to be crawling with kids. And these were not kids who were breaking from classes at Portland High School.
Right. That's the kids. I see a lot of kids, but they're all from high school. They've got like backpacks and sneakers and stuff.
Right.
Well, I don't know. I hope he finds a way to piece his life together, because that is what an incredible challenge that's going to be.
The other thing that the case just brought to mind for me was that Amy Fairfield, the lawyer for Sanborn, saw something and went after it, and really, she doesn't take full credit. Of course, she doesn't deserve full credit. There's lawyers ahead of her who did a lot of the work, and this investigative reporter and a lot of other people who contributed. But she did the work, and the reason why I think somebody like that takes on a case is because they themselves can believe that an injustice was done. So many people, like I have cases, I represent plaintiffs in civil rights cases, and a lot of people are like, oh, that could never happen. The police would never do that.
Right.
But Fairfield herself was the woman who was, finally said enough is enough when the guards at the jail would make women take off their bras because they had wires under them. And so, I mean, when you experience for yourself that there are people working in these positions who do not have, the kind of moral framework that you would expect of a public servant, then you have the open space to go after a case like this.
She fills that role very well.
Yeah,
I mean,
she does.
The most compelling moment of all last week was that it was on TV. It was everywhere, where they're arguing about bail, and she looks at the judge and says, "This stops now." I mean, it was just one of those moments where, she had that whole courtroom in the palm of her hand.
Okay, well, this stops now. I've been informed that we're running out of time. Anybody, what are you working for?
No, we have one more topic. O'Reilly, right?
Oh,
okay, you want to close that with Bill O'Reilly?
Well, I think that the stories around Bill O'Reilly raise an interesting question. I mean, he's one of the most successful cable news political pundit blowhards, and only in the presidency of Donald Trump do these corporate people finally put enough financial pressure on the show to get rid of the guy. Now, do I personally think he's, his life is over? Absolutely not. He's getting a huge payout. But I just think it's interesting that the silver lining, perhaps, of the unbelievable fact that we have Donald Trump in the presidency is maybe that things are changing. I don't know.
The most interesting fact I read today was in the New York Times that this now raises the amount of money that has been paid out in sexual harassment scandals by 21st Century Fox to $85 million. But the more interesting part of that is that I believe they said $60 million of it has gone to either Roger Ailes or Bill O'Reilly.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean...
Wow. So, obviously, I'm not a fan of Bill O'Reilly. I don't think I watched his show more than a couple of times. I've seen clips, but, I've been aware of him for a long time, and he's really was sort of a pioneer in kind of capturing how angry people are. And
pioneer. I mean,
in terms of
he monetized the angry white guy.
He did.
Yes.
He turned it from a fringe into, look, it's like practically our system of government now.
Well, and he actually, he showed how you can be an absolute hypocrite, because on the one hand, he would be so morally aghast at Hillary Clinton's alleged untruthfulness, and then he would report that he was apparently in some military battle that he wasn't in. I mean, he's lies through his teeth, but apparently he has a different standard applied.
It catches up with him sooner or later.
I hope so. That's the thing, is you hope it.
Although I don't think he's done. He's going to. Remember what happened with Don Imus. I mean, he'll find another platform.
Oh yeah, because
I guess the point I was going to make though is that the anger doesn't go away. Even if he goes away, and it's not because viewers turn their backs on him, like you said, Cynthia. It's the corporate sponsors that didn't want to be associated with him. But somebody that pool of anger is out there for him or somebody else in another format, and. I
don't think Tucker Carlson quite has the I don't know, energy level.
He's smarmy.
Well,
smarmy. Is that as good as angry?
It's going to be interesting to see who fills the void. I don't think it's a given right now. They're doing their reshuffling of programming right now, but who emerges as the new standard bearer for that audience I think is still very much in doubt.
Well, there's opportunity too in terms of politics, though. I mean, I think Democrats, like to the extreme left, demonize corporations, and there's always talk about corporations. And here, I think, is an example of when, what the only thing that can fight against this kind of elite group that everybody dislikes, that has everything, are corporations that have these kinds of money. So I think the Democrats have to embrace, to a certain extent, corporate personhood is here whether we like it or not, and that we can't demonize every corporation, because good corporations that can put pressure on people like Bill O'Reilly are the only real players that can, fight back against Adelson and these other guys who can drop checks for $5 million here and $10 million there. I mean,
it's Sinatra's world, and we just live in it. That's it. I hope the corporate overlords will be good to us.
No, it's just that unfortunately, unions have totally decreased in their effectiveness and membership, and the only way people have power is in sort of collective action. And grassroots is great, but you also need, legal forms of resources, and to the extent that business people are willing to come out in support of these issues is good for Democrats.
Okay. And so you have a column for Sunday?
My column is going to be excellent.
Oh, good. And early, too. It's going to be, going to have it by noon? Mm-hmm. All right.
I'm writing about updating the Alfond College Challenge, which they made. They launched it in 2008. They made it universal in 2013, so that every kid born in Maine automatically gets his $500 investment. And now they're kind of putting more emphasis on it as these kids start to approach kindergarten, setting up a great website. And it's interesting. They're setting it up so that parents and eventually the kids can track it just like you would a 401k.
That is fun. That's good.
Yeah.
And see how your investment is doing. And at the same time, encourage the families to start kicking in a little money too. They've already enrolled 35,000 kids, and the total amount invested, not counting families, is now $70 million.
Wow.
So who invests it?
Fame handles most of it. Finance Authority of Maine.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm expecting that there's going to be a new Republican healthcare bill coming out in the next couple of days, possibly over the weekend, and we'll probably write about that for Sunday. And it looks like Medicaid is again in the crosshairs.
They're trying to hit that 100th day.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the only reason they're doing this.
They want something on the board,
something to vote on, and
Talk about, isn't it great when you have something like that driving such a huge public policy?
It's sweeps week. You got to get the good ratings. All right, so we'll definitely have something to talk about next week, and thank you for coming in.
See you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Portland Press Herald podcast. Make sure you never miss a podcast episode by subscribing on iTunes or your favorite podcast aggregator. For more of our podcasts, visit pressherald.com/podcasts. Follow the link there to this episode to leave a comment. You can also leave a comment on our Facebook page. I'm Chad Gilley. Once again, thank you for listening to the Portland Press Herald podcast.